Senator Joe Manchin's daughter, who used to be the CEO of Mylan Pharmaceuticals, was actually a key player in a plot to monopolize the market for the severe allergy medication known as EpiPen. Now, this is something that most people suspected, but thanks to new reporting by Ryan Grimm over at The Intercept, we now have some documents in the form of email exchanges making it abundantly clear that Mylan Pharmaceuticals, under her leadership, very intentionally made sure that there was no competition in the market for the EpiPen. Now, let me give you the details of what we've learned through this reporting. In a January 2011 email on behalf of Heather BRESCH, that's the former CEO of Mylan and also, of course, Senator Manchin's daughter, to her counterpart at Pfizer, to then CEO Ian Reid, BRESCH confirms a previous discussion with Reid in which she says that the two agreed that as part of a deal, Pfizer, a competing pharmaceutical company, would disinvest from its EpiPen competitor, Adrenaclick. Eliminating its main competitor would then allow Mylan to continue raising its prices. Now, understand something. It's not just the executives over at Mylan that very clearly did something wrong here. They essentially collaborated with the executives over at Pfizer to ensure that there was a monopoly, essentially. And then what they would do is share the profits. So BRESCH's assistant wrote in an email to executives at Pfizer, quote, "I'm sending you this email as a reminder that you were to send me confirmation relative to our discussion regarding EpiPen. In that discussion, you indicated that you would be divesting your Adrenaclick product from Pfizer/King deal closes. Once the Pfizer/King deal closes. I understand your tender offer is closing today, so I would appreciate receiving your response as soon as possible." Now, how do we have these email exchanges? How do we have these documents? Well, Mylan is currently undergoing an antitrust investigation. They're dealing with a pretty serious lawsuit. And as a result, a judge recently decided to basically allow for these documents to be made public. And so Ryan Grimm obtained them, he reported on them, and now it's really abundantly clear that there was essentially collusion between Mylan and Pfizer in order to do what they ended up doing with the EpiPen. And the price of EpiPens went from about $100 to more than $600. Now, for those who might have decent insurance, the insurance companies would cover most of the costs for the EpiPen. For people who don't have insurance, they're basically screwed, right? But understand that even with insurance companies covering part of the cost for EpiPens, what ends up happening is the inflated cost or the inflated price leads to higher premiums for all of us. That's how the system works. Now, how did they exactly monopolize the market? Well, by divesting from Adrenaclick and continuing to allow Mylan to sell the EpiPen at inflated prices, both firms would split the profits from the more expensive version, allowing Pfizer to earn more than it would if it had driven down prices with its cheaper generic version. That's what Pfizer was originally planning to do, but executives, based on these documents, hit up Pfizer and were like, bro, look, how about don't release your whole generic version? Mylan will inflate the prices of the drug and we'll share the profits. Now, it gets a little more detailed because how did this all go down? Because Pfizer initially did pose a threat to Mylan Pharmaceuticals. So in 2007, for instance, Mylan acquired rights to market the drug from Merck. The deal, or the result of the deal with Merck, was that Mylan manufactured part of the EpiPen delivery system, but not the medication itself, while owning the brand name and the right to distribute the whole product. The drug itself was produced by King Pharmaceuticals, which manufactured it exclusively for Mylan. Now in comes Pfizer. Pfizer buys King. the very group or the very company that's actually manufacturing the drug, right? So King in 2010 announced that it would be purchased by Pfizer, which was licensed to sell Adrenaclick, an EpiPen competitor, the previous year. The deal between Pfizer and Mylan led Pfizer to withdraw its competitor from the market and partner with Mylan on EpiPen, locking down a monopoly. So you as a patient, your family members as potential patients, they don't have a choice. There is no competition to the EpiPen. There's no generic version because once there was some possibility of a generic version, you have the executives over at Mylan hitting up the executives over at Pfizer and essentially both agreeing that there would be no generic version. Mylan would inflate the price of the EpiPen and then they would share the profits. So it gets even worse. Following the deal with Pfizer, Mylan, as I mentioned, drove the price above $600 within 5 years. And look, once they corner the market that way, once Mylan knows that they have no competitors, they can do whatever they want. They can price gouge patients, they could price gouge insurers, which is exactly what they did. But Senator Joe Manchin's daughter, who again was the CEO of Mylan Pharmaceuticals at the time, went even further. She's like, she's got a little taste, want a little more. So what did she do? According to Ryan Grimm's reporting, the documents also show BRESCH approving a scheme to force customers captured by the company's monopoly to purchase 2 EpiPens at once, regardless of medical need. The monopoly had created space for the new scheme, and the new scheme created extra revenue at Mylan, split with Pfizer, thus entrenching the monopoly and warding off generics, and also set aside to dole out as rebates to third parties who might complain, according to internal correspondence. So I want to take you to this video featuring Heather BRESCH, who was being questioned by members of Congress. This was a congressional hearing on the price gouging that was taking place. This is a video from 2016, and she very clearly lies in this exchange. Let's take a look.
Did you plan on increasing the price in 2017?
No, sir, we did not.
Okay, but you did have a plan then to raise it every year for 5 or 6 years?
And if you look at what we received out of that money,
I just asked you a question. Did you have a plan to raise the price every year for 6 years?
We have raised the price. We have raised the price, and I think managing to what we received, that 274 out of the 608 is what we were managing.
So you're obviously proud of your company. You think that was fair then to raise the price each year to that point, even though you got a drug at $100, which was probably too much for the drug considering what the cost is. I know you made a fancy clicker because I had one of your reps come by my office back in 2009 or 10, show me how to use it. So I know that costs a little bit of money, but generally when a drug goes to generic, doesn't the price go down?
Which is why we dropped it to $300.
Only after you jacked it up to $600. It's like if I go buy this tie and they say it's $600, but we're gonna sell it to me for $300, that doesn't make it worth $300. You fixed the price on the drug.
Now, she's clearly lying. I mean, the question was clear. Did you intend on inflating the price of this drug? And she pretended as if she didn't. When in reality, these email exchanges make it abundantly clear that they very intentionally created a monopoly for the drug with the very intention of inflating the prices to price gouge patients and insurers. I bring you to yet another email exchange. This is with Mylan's COO Lloyd Sanders at the time. He wrote to Heather BRESCH, Harry, Ron, Joe, Mike, and I are recommending a price increase now for EpiPen. The original plan was to increase in December or January, assuming there was no backlash from Project X2 at payers. X2 is where they forced patients to buy 2 EpiPens at once. Now he continues to write, Project X2 implementation has been without any issues. Last price increase was May of 2011. No pushback on that either, Sanders wrote. The incremental sales would be 5.5 million to 6 million, and it all drops to the bottom line. You see what they're doing there? I mean, very intentional, very clear what they were doing, what the plan was. It's not like they're like, oh, wait, we didn't see this coming. Like, of course they knew what they were doing. But now it's very clear that they intentionally created a monopoly, which is great evidence in this antitrust lawsuit that Mylan is currently dealing with. Now, when Heather BRESCH received some backlash on this issue, she was like, look, I get it. I'm a good person. I don't want people to be price gouged. The system is broken, that's the problem. Now, does she actually want to do what's necessary to fix the broken system? Of course not. You think she's gonna go after her own profit motives? You think she's gonna do something that's gonna hurt her ability to earn more money, to essentially rob people so she could make more money? That's a better way of putting it. I take you to our final video on this. It gives you a sense of who Heather BRESCH is, and keep this in mind as you hear from Senator Joe Manchin, who does not want to pass the budget reconciliation bill, which includes an expansion of Medicare and also includes a provision that would allow for Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies. He doesn't like that. You know why? Because it's gonna hurt his daughter's bottom line. She don't like that either. She makes it clear in this video.
Just cancel the price increase. Why can't you do that?
I have to play, the reality is in the brand pharmaceutical market, this isn't an EpiPen issue, this isn't a Mylan issue, this is a healthcare issue.
So you would support the change in the law that would allow the US government to negotiate drug prices for Medicare and Medicaid?
No, I don't know that that's the answer.
BRESCH calls the healthcare system broken, with too many middlemen demanding a cut.
So she throws Pfizer under the bus. Too many middlemen demanding a cut. That's the problem. We have to inflate our prices because remember, we essentially cut a deal with Pfizer to monopolize this market. So we got to pay Pfizer their cut. We want to make money too, so we're gonna inflate the price. That's the, if you were to decode what she's saying, that's what it's really about. Okay, that's what she means when she's talking about the middlemen. But the middlemen are there because she intentionally created a situation where the middlemen are there. I mean, this was all a way of creating a monopoly and ensuring that there is no competitor to the EpiPen. And some might say, well, I mean, this is wrong. I mean, this is crony capitalism, this is corruption, whatever you want. No, but this is how capitalism works. That's why you need the federal government. You need an actual antitrust division within the federal government to rein in capitalism. But understand that this is how the system works. And even when it comes to the issue of competition, we hear all the rosy stories about, capitalism's competitive edge and how it's so great. But understand that competition also leads corporations to offshore jobs to ensure that they can maximize profits and make more in revenue and profits compared to their competitors. So there are two sides to competition. It's just that one side we don't hear much about in our corporate media or in any of this analysis regarding the economy. And finally, one more element to this story that shouldn't really blow your mind at this point, because it seems like everyone in the Manchin family is looking for a grift, because Manchin's wife was very much involved in this too. Gail Manchin, BRESCH's mother, lobbied states to require schools to stock the EpiPen as the head of the National Association of State Boards of Education. Gail Manchin was recently confirmed to serve as the co-chair of the Federal Appalachian Regional Commission, a government agency tasked with promoting economic development across the region's 13 states. Fantastic. What a great choice. Now, Biden certainly is trying to appeal to Joe Manchin with some carrots. His wife got that sweet, sweet gig. But it's time for Biden to use the sticks. Because if there's any chance of the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill passing, he needs to ensure that Joe Manchin, who's pushing back against that very legislation, bends to his will. The question is, does Biden really want it? And we're gonna have to wait and see. But we do know what the influencing factors are for someone like Senator Manchin. It's not that he's a Democratic senator from a red state. It's not that he's trying to appeal to conservatives. It's not that he values bipartisanship. He has his corporate donors to worry about, but more importantly, his own family's profits. That's what he's worried about. That's what motivates him. And that's what media never talks about, with the exception of a few independent outlets.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.